And thank you everyone who just joined in the meantime. I put in the chat a little link so that we can collaborate together on this hour and a half. It's gonna be a heavily interactive session, and so you can go to the URL. There's gonna be a little quiz asking how experienced you are, and while the new people do that, Julia, can you enable the screen sharing for me, please? So that, or maybe me co-host maybe, so that I get access to the breakouts as well.
I'm doing that for you.
No problem.
Here you
and
are.
So we're gonna do a little bit of like setting the stage in terms of like what is a retrospective, and there's gonna be like time for questions in this phase. It's gonna be interactive. It's gonna be through this tool called Mentimeter, and then we will practice an Agile retrospective. And then we will send you into breakouts to reflect a little bit about what we saw, and then come back and ask further questions, make conclusions, and stuff like that. So yeah, feel free to add to Mentimeter. You can use the QR code that is on my camera just now. Briefly about myself, I started as a software developer back in 2001. I kind of started just building stuff, and then around the mid 2000 I kind of like learned about some Agile principles, started following some of them and test drive my code and be more kind of like aware of some of those principles. I then went to Australia. I continued there. I lived there for 7 years. I was again mostly doing software development and more into Agile environments where we were doing practices here and there. And then I moved to the US. I was in New York City for a little bit, again, as a software developer. And then when I moved to Colorado, I kind of transitioned to more like a coaching role, software development coaching role, and then product management. And around that, like 5-6 years ago is when I started like spending more and more time facilitating and reading book about facilitation techniques rather than engineering techniques. And I found it a lot of fun. And so now I'm kind of full-time focused on facilitation, Agile coaching, even though I still enjoy looking at the technical side of things. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself. So thanks for the people that have started filling in this little form. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share the screen so that we can see where we're at. So we have 20 people out of, I think we have 38 participants, so that's pretty good. So if you haven't already, you can head to menti.com, type in the code, and express how do you feel your Agile retrospective skill set is between novice and expert. And I'm going to give another couple of moments, and then we're going to reveal the results.
Enrico, I really love how you put it here. So the advanced beginner, that sounds so cool. So you're beginning, but you're already advancing. This is where I have put myself. So frankly speaking, where I feel. Where are you, Enrico? Where do you think you are? Well, I know the answer, but it's interesting.
I'm currently based in northern Italy. So fun fact, this year I was meant to go on a sabbatical. And then so I left my job in Santa Monica, and I said, okay, I'm gonna go travel the world. And that was, guess when? At the end of February, beginning of March, when the pandemic still wasn't exploded completely. And so I parked myself, I can show you on my background camera, just here in northern Italy, between Milan and Venice. And I'm just gonna zoom it out a little bit more. So yeah. Between Milan and Venice, there's a lake called Lake Garda, and yeah, so that's where I am currently.
Wow, that should be beautiful. I'm connecting from Spain, from a Mallorca island, which looks like summer with the sunny beaches already. Moscow State University Business School, definitely. Moscow, obviously. Guys, if you did your Menti, can you please write in the chat where are you from and what you're doing in life, so who you are, so we know you a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. And feel free to post in your LinkedIn or whatever you want to connect later on. Maybe we can share that, Julia, at the end of this call. And so here we are. We had a little bit of an overview of where we're at, and the fact that most people are on this side is actually good, so that we can start from maybe some basic concepts. And yeah, so Agile Retrospectives, like Julia said, it's a tool that can be used both in your personal life and in the professional side. And I believe some of you might already be using some of those concepts that are core into an Agile Retrospectives. We will see that during this presentation. So let's start off with a principle 12. So we talked about earlier, there are 12 principles in the Agile Manifesto, and I invite everyone again to go to menti.com, and I'm not just going to read stuff to you. I'm actually going to make it more interactive, so you're going to complete what these sentences are. So again, head to menti.com. I see 15, 16 people already there. And so we're going to look a little bit about the principle 12, which is at the core of an Agile retrospective. So the reason for a retrospective to exist is very much entangled with the 12th Agile principle. And we'll do an activity where you're asked to fill in the gaps of what does principle 12 say. So you can do this on your phone, you can do this on your browser, you can click on your camera and use a QR code next to my image, or just go to menti.com and type in the code. It might ask you the name, because this is actually gonna be a little quiz, so at the end someone will get first prize. And I think Julia has a special Moscow University prize t-shirt. Is that correct? No, I'm joking. I don't know. I'm making that up.
Don't worry.
I'll send a postcard from Italy. I don't know. There's gonna be some prize that we'll come up with maybe. And so let's start us off. 22 people are on it, and you can join later on as you see fit. What does Principle 12 say? At the beginning, blah, 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 the theme. What is the first sentence of this 12th principle? Every week, regular intervals when it needs. 5 people replied. It's going to be a very quick way to interact. So.
Wow, that's a difficult one. You know, we didn't tell what are the principles actually. So the ones we're celebrating here.
Yeah, and the reason for this is I really rather not read stuff to you guys, but make you interactively learning it. So the fact that you don't know about it, it's perfectly fine. And we'll see at the end what the meaning of this sentence is. So the second part. So a regular cadence is the first guess. The second part is you're gonna have 3 options. A regular interval, the team does what? The team reflect, the team fixes, the team share. One, 22 people, 23 people, okay, also. Yeah, reflect. So reflection is really at the key of the 12th Agile principle. And the fact that it's not a regular cadence is also key. We don't do retrospectives, we don't do this reflection only when we need it. When we need it is sometimes too late. Very often it's too late, stuff is already on fire. So it's a regular cadence. We reflect on that's the next portion. A regular interval, the team reflects on how to, and look at the options and fill in the one you think is the correct one. Yeah, how to become more effective. Sometimes creating action items is an outcome of a retrospective, and that's not necessarily bad, but the purpose is really to become more effective. So we have a higher goal. How can we become more effective? And the last portion is, so a regular interval, the team reflects on how to become more effective, and then what does it do? Celebrates, goes back working, tunes and adjusts. Oh, awesome. And yes, we can celebrate. And yes, sometimes we go back to work, but a lot of us guessed correct. It's tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. So this really, and I'm not going to go through the other principles since we're talking about retrospectives, and I feel retrospectives can be taken, and the principle can be taken and used outside of the context of Agile. So we don't need to think about working software. We don't need to think about other principles that might apply. But this really, to me, is just like a style that any sustainable business should keep in mind. At regular intervals, so not only when there's a fire, not only when something went wrong and then we have to fix it, and so it becomes like a second nature kind of thing. We reflect. The team reflects. So it's not just we're fixing things, we're reflecting on how to become more effective. And then tune and adjust accordingly. So obviously we're not just talking, we also have to get something done. Otherwise it's just talking. And we'll see today in this hour together. And so now we're going to talk about the Agile Retrospective framework. So Diana Larsen and Esther Derby, inspired by the work of Norman Kurth in the late 90s, a book called Project Retrospective. They wrote a book called Agile Retrospectives. Project Retrospectives were focused on end of the project when projects were running for months, versus the book that they wrote focused on cyclical iteration retrospectives, so shorter feedback cycles. And they have 5 steps, which we'll see together, which I think are very useful at a personal level, outside of software, because they really encompass a solid structure on how to really become more effective. And the first step is to set the stage. It's going to be interactive again, so get ready with your phone or with your browser. So the definition here from the book is it's a step to help people focus on the work at hand. So if we work as a team especially, it helps the group understand what are we about to do. How often have you been in meetings where you don't know what's about to happen? Where there is no purpose and no outcome, and you're like, oh my God, it's another meeting, what's this about? So setting the stage is a step to slow the group down. Maybe they come from doing something else, maybe writing software, maybe doing something else, and okay, this is the goal for the time that we have. It also contributes creating an atmosphere where people feel they can contribute. This is a great spot. Julia mentioned psychological safety. This is a perfect spot to assess that, and we'll see how to do that later in the session. So setting the stage. What is the purpose of setting the stage? Why are we doing this step? And like before, you'll have a series of options and fill in the one that you think is correct. You only have one. I know that multiple are correct, but you can only pick one, and you have about 30 seconds to do that. And people replied. A few more seconds for everyone to contribute. Alrighty, and so some were honeypots that I put in there, some were correct. So assess psychological safety, we talked about that. Assess the team engagement. So do we have a group of people that don't want to be here, that have been forced to be here? So when you work with a team of individuals, it's interesting to get those sort of informations. Foster an atmosphere, connect to the theme. Maybe we are focusing on something that we know it's an issue, and in agreement with the team, we focus on that. In agreement with the team, we focus on that theme, on that specific subject that we look into. Now, things that is not correct is clarify that we will find who's responsible for our problems. So in there is hidden an assumption that it's someone's fault. And so when we get into a retrospective, we want to create this atmosphere where there's no naming and no blaming. So it's much less interesting to find out the name of the person than it is to find out about the context. And so there's another statement called Kurzband Directive, which states that regardless of what we discover today, we truly believe that everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew at the time, their skills and ability, the situation available, and the resources at hand. What that means is that, and I wrote a blog post about this, so I don't want to unpack it right now, but there's much more interesting things to find out about the skill, the abilities, the context, the resources available than it was James' fault for doing this and that. So we try and stay away from pointing fingers. And that creates this atmosphere where people feel safe about contributing. Without that, people won't do this next step. People won't be gathering data, which is where you share information about what you've seen, heard during the thing that you're looking at. At a personal level, here is where you start thinking, okay, what happened in the last week? People do personal retrospectives all the time. And I'm not very good at it. I don't do it at regular cadence. I should. And I think that's the other thing. Maybe sometimes it's more useful, sometimes it's less useful to do it at your personal level. As a team level, I think it's really fundamental because it's putting all the perspectives together. So this gathering data does exactly that, creates a shared picture about what happened. Because I might have my idea, Daria might have her idea, Biliana her idea, Anna her idea. And so when you gather data, you put all the pieces of the puzzle next to each other. And then this allows us to expand our perspective and to move to the next step. So gathering data, what is the purpose of that? So feel free to join in and to answer the question again. Which one do you think is the purpose of gathering data? About 30 seconds. Oh, and I didn't mention it, but the faster you reply, the more points you get. So if you get it right and fast, it's extra points. Five seconds. Alrighty. Yeah, getting a shared perspective. Now, there's a couple of honeypots in here. One is list areas of improvement. And let me jump on that real quick. Sometimes we jump to conclusions in a retrospective, and that is one of the issues that I see. Like, oh, this is the problem, how do we fix it? Really, the 5 steps and the ideal process is, this is the data, this is what happened. What can we do about it is the next step. And in that phase, we might come up with ideas to improve it. Starting with what's wrong and how do we fix it sets us in a very linear, kind of like focused way that I think it doesn't make the best out of at that time. By the way, there's going to be time for questions at the end. So if some of this is a little bit controversial, so I'll be taking questions in the chat or once we finish this phase. Getting to the root cause of issues is another kind of leading statement. It assumes that there is one root cause, and sometimes issues that we see do not have one, or might not even have a root cause. They might be like wicked issues, systemic polarities that are entangled. And so that's the other honeypot. And listing problems and their solution is another kind of like linear, this is the problem, here's how we fix it, which could be improved by adding an extra step. So giving equal opportunity is one of the good ones. The next step is generating insights. So this is once you have the data, once you have the shared picture about what happened, about events, okay, let's try not jump to conclusions and spend some time like reflecting on what is most important and how can we work more effectively about that. So here what happens is we won't fix everything. So in the generating data, there might be a lot of things. In generating insights, we look for patterns, we look for similarities. Once we find those similarities, we ask the group, hey, what is most important to us? And then we focus on that 1 or 2 things, maybe 3. But at the end of a retro, you should get like 1 or 2 action items. If you get too many, the risk is that you won't carry over any of them. And we'll see how to focus on that, deciding what to do next. But first, we foster these generating insights. Very often, this step is skipped in retrospectives. And maybe we chat about it for like a couple of minutes, and then we decide what to do. The issue there is, this is where we create divergent thinking, where we come up with a lot of ideas about how can we make this area better. And so it requires time to get to deeper reflection. Now, reflection by itself is useless, so it will be followed by doing something. But now let's focus on what is the purpose of generating insights. And so,
Enrico, I have a
Yes.
message that maybe for some parts where you explain a lot, can you put the music a little bit down
Yes.
so we can hear you better? I think due to internet connection, it can be that sometimes it's a bit noisy.
I see. Thank you. Thanks for that feedback. And yeah, keep the feedback coming. Julia, if you can look at that, let me know like you just did. That's perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so next up are the questions on generating insights. What is the purpose of generating insights? "30 seconds for finding out." Okay, 24 people, and the time is up. So list idea for improvement. Perfect. So this is the time that we list those ideas. Not when we gather the data, but when we generate the insights. We reflect on the generated data. We look for patterns. Now the facilitator creates clusters for the group. That is actually like a big no-no. That the facilitator usually should let the group create those clusters or let the group find those informations. Otherwise, some people call it fascipulation, where we see things and we make it happen, but really it's a group exercise. And so we, again, depend on what the facilitator role is. Maybe we're also the team lead, in which case we're wearing two hats, and we can discuss that later. But usually we don't want to do things for the group. We want to be part of the group, but also let them kind of see those clusters. Finding the culprit of our problem, that was another honeypot. Again, we're not trying to point fingers and to find whose fault it is, even if maybe that's the way we think. And honestly, that's the way I used to think as well. So I don't expect that this presentation will change your mind, because it took me a long journey to shift my mindset from it's someone's fault to how can we work better in this space, and what was the context when that happened. So yeah, foster divergent thinking and look at causes and effects. And then we decide what to do. So then we have all those ideas. At this point, we have options about what to do. And again, we might have like 3, 4, something like that. We want to filter them down to 1 or 2, and then make it an actionable plan. So we don't just want to talk about stuff and have wishful thinking. Decide what to do is a phase where it becomes a concrete action. And so what is the purpose of deciding what to do? And you'll have a few options popping up.
Enrico, that's not easy. Not at all.
The question or the... So this... Yeah, this question had a couple of honeypots, and yeah, making it more concrete, clarify the actions within our area of control. We'll see what that means, because that is an interesting one. Sometimes items are not within our area of control, and this is especially at our personal life. This can be really important. So if we're doing a personal retrospective, right? The fact that we can't see our family because of COVID restriction, especially these times, or something that is beyond our control, gives us a point of view about, okay, how can we respond to that rather than what can we do about it. Yeah, fixing all the issues, I kind of like hit on that nail a little bit. We're not trying to fix everything. We're trying to focus on 1 or 2 things. And adding new story or chores for the backlog, that can be an outcome again, if the team likes to track their action items that way, but it's not necessarily the purpose. I know that some school of thought think that is the way to go, that we need to create new stories. But our retrospectives, in my opinion, shouldn't be just creating more stuff to do. It should be a way to incorporate change and improvement in our work. And it should be like, affecting all the team. And then after that, after we decided what to do, there's the second, I guess, most important step, which is closing out. So making sure that people know what's about to happen and also provide feedback about this session. How was it? How well spent was the time? Basically, you're running a mini retrospective on the retrospective. And this is really critical because it allows you as the facilitator, as the team lead, or just as a team to realize, okay, what did we like? Did I like the background music? Did I not like the background music? Did I like this activity or that activity? Was this too short or too fast? As the facilitator, collecting that feedback allows you to see patterns. So again, we're not trying to just receive all the feedback and change everything. See patterns and influence your next session. So really important to close out. Also not to end it too abruptly. So if it's scheduled for an hour, make sure that the last 10 minutes are just to kind of like decompress and be ready for the next element. So what is the purpose of closing out? And then we're going to have a little bit of a Q&A. Alrighty, time is up, and we have, ensure the team knows what our action items are. Get drinks and eat food is, it's actually a very good way to create, when we were in the face-to-face space, to create a connection with people. Sometimes it might be just the focus of closing out, so that was kind of like a honeypot in that sense. And yeah, so that is that. And let me see, I think I have, okay, there's a leaderboard here. So there was someone under codename Banana and Cake. So Banana won. So Banana, congratulations, you got 7,698 points. And whoops, and then there was Cake. And now it's time for questions. So if you have questions about those 5 steps, and Julia, you might have caught some of them in the chat, feel free to capture them through Mentimeter if you haven't submitted yet. Or so let's do this for about 5 minutes before we move on to the next step.
So as I understand you, Enrico, is it that, a retrospective meeting is something quite easy to implement? However, at very stage, you need to understand what is the objective of it when you prepare, when you set the stage. At every stage, you need to reflect and ask, why I'm doing that, for what? Yeah, this is the main outcome for me. So you need to have kind of theoretical background behind all that as well to make it efficient. Am I right?
I mean, the 5 steps, I guess once you kind of like are familiar with it, the theory behind it, I might not share it with the team. As a facilitator, I do like to get into some of those details, but the format, the format is pretty much like an opening, a closing, and then in the middle, we look at what happened, what do we make about it, and so what is our action? I think when you prepare, when I prepare, I kind of like to think, where is the group? What activities suits those 5 steps? And there is always a little bit of preparation. But yeah, just being aware about those 5 steps helps, in my opinion, to get to a deeper understanding of the stage. Julia, did I answer your question?
Yep. We have a question from Samaya as well on regularity that may impact the tasks assigned. So I don't know if I get the question completely.
Yeah. Hi, thank you for bringing that up. Actually, initially, we talked about having regular meetings with the team so that we can draw a conclusion as to what has to be done and go through all those 5 tasks which we mentioned. But I wanted to understand, is it necessary to do these regular catch-ups on daily basis? Because at times team have a very tight schedule of a task that has to be met. So is it
Yeah.
required, or how it is to be managed?
Yeah, so I think a regular cadence, and then the cadence is up to you, up to the team. Usually, when working with software team, we were running iteration retrospectives, following those 5 steps. And the time, again, depending on the group size, it can vary between like hour 15, hour and a half for a group of 5 or 6 people, looking back at a week or 2. And then what we were doing, we were then running daily retrospectives, much shorter and more focused on what went well, what didn't go so well. Is there any quick improvement that we can put in place? Those were for the low-hanging fruit, for things that were maybe not popping up at the end of the iteration, and just as a way to do that. Those were like maybe 10 minutes end of the day, pluses and delta, what was a highlight of today, what was a bummer. So not necessarily doing the full 5 steps.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. That answers.
Cool. And I see a few questions popping up here, Julia, so I might just go through them. What do you think? Yeah? I see you nodding. Cool. So how does a new Scrum Master handle his first retrospective? That's a great question. So the first thing that I would recommend is find a mentor. Find someone that you trust, either at your company or in the community, and ask for help. I wish I knew that. I didn't. I basically just read a lot of books and tried. So that's another way that you can go with. Just like I think that book that we had is a good way to do it. The other thing to keep in mind is to involve the team and make sure that they're aware about what's about to happen. And yeah, that should be one way to go. And probably not to pick activities that are too convoluted. Something easy, something that is we'll see later. I'll show some activities that I do. So yeah, something simple and that you're familiar with, and maybe practice a bit. So those are kind of like a couple of tips that I would give. And then next up, what resources can the audience share in the chat for retrospectives idea? Yeah, that's great. So if people want to do that, yeah, put in those links. I think that's always great. Retromat is one website. Do you see Retromat now, Julia, or can you give me a thumbs up, or do you still see the slides? I'm not sure.
I see the retro map, the colorful one.
Okay, cool. Perfect. I wasn't sure if that would. So Retromat is one place to kind of like collects activity that follow the 5 steps. So when you click here, set the stage, you get just a bunch of activities, which some of them we'll actually test later. So yeah, that would be my one suggestion. Liberating Structures has some activities that you can purpose for retrospective. Triz is one that I use quite a lot in retrospectives. So that's another way to do that. Yeah, so that's that. But yeah, feel free to put stuff in the chat, so we'll share it later.
Can you?
Yes. Yeah, I'll at the end of the I'll type it back in. But it's retromat.org. Actually, let's do it right now. Retromat.org. Right. So next, how do you get the team to participate in retrospective, especially when everyone stays quiet? How do you get them to talk? Yeah. So that's a great one. So the facilitator is meant to like encourage full participation. This is kind of like there are activities to encourage participation. So, for example, that goes hand in hand with handling silence. So sometimes you always, when you ask, does anyone have any comments, count to 20. And that's not like 1, 2, 3, 4, it's like 1001, 1002, and you do that in your head. So maybe you can put music in the background, but just like give people time to do that and use a mix of this open conversation where people just go round robin and talk, and silent activities. So does anyone have any thoughts? Let's take a 5 minutes and put our thoughts in the chat, like we're doing partially in this session. Or when you use a digital whiteboard, let's create post-it notes and do that. And then usually silent activity, I do for 5 minutes. Longer than that might be a little bit too long. And then you go back to open conversation and ask questions. So that could be one way. So yeah, that's one idea. The thing to do also at the beginning is understanding, is this a psychological safe environment? If I have a room full of prisoners, people that won't feel safe about saying stuff because of repercussions, that's linked to so all those psychological safety issues, then what I would do at the beginning, once I know the room is full of prisoners, what would make this room feel like they're not prisoners? So rather than focus on what was on my agenda, focus on how can I make this a safe environment? Otherwise they won't talk, and the retro will be not very effective. Who should participate in a retro meeting? I guess that always depends on the team. I would make sure that the team is okay with having whoever we invite. Sometimes inviting a stakeholder, it's not good. But it's not good. But I guess how is it not good is the question. So if it's a psychological safe environment, the pressure, the report, I guess connection between there's a manager and there's a team. But yeah, those are things to keep in mind. So if someone is the manager and they come in the retro, are they gonna judge what people say? So find out what the team is comfortable with, and look into that. But yeah, there isn't like one answer, and we can expand on this later because it's an interesting one. And then how do you make a team members share openly when you're conducting the retrospective remotely? Most mic needs to be on mute. Some don't even turn on the mic camera. Yeah, so for the cameras, for example, I mean, there are like tricks to turn them on. And one we could try right now. Leave your desk and bring back something color red. So if you wanna do that now, you're gonna leave your desk and bring back something red and show it to us. And now I don't have a timer, and actually, is this recorded, Julia? I think we are recording, right?
Yeah.
So I think
I'm
that's kind of like
red tops in public,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
One of my.
So I think this is kind of like a little bit of a false start, because I guess people don't wanna. Some people might not want to be recorded doing that. But I try to use those activities to turn the camera on, to make it meaningful and to see each other. Now, camera is also connected to connections, so sometimes people's connections are slow. So you might want to like just be aware of that. The same applies for before. Ask for silent questions, silent activities, give people time to respond, and make sure it's psychological safe environment. So that should give you a good gauge of people being people contributing or not. Should always be the Scrum Master facilitating? It depends. Usually no. If people in the group wants to facilitate, they should step up and do it. And the Scrum Master can co-facilitate with them and foster them to be facilitators. So the answer is no. To me at least, it's no. I would just be careful in forcing people to do it. I've been in an environment where now it's your turn to facilitate and people don't want to, and they do a poor job because they don't want to do it. So yeah, just be aware of that. But yeah, rotate the facilitator.
Can I share something as well? Because this topic of people, not being open, being afraid, or, to talk, switch on the video, this is so important. I think this is one of the biggest challenges. And on one session, just a second, I have my sound on. On one session, there was a magic question asked, can you please, guys, measure your emotional temperature? So imagine when you're 36.6, it means you're perfectly fine and balanced, feeling, happy and productive. If your emotional temperature is higher, it may be you're overstressed. If you have a lower temperature, you maybe feel, exhausted and tired. And, that was so great, to reflect. And I think this opening questions every time different and creative. They really help people to switch on their little kid inside, you know, have some fun. So guys, we didn't measure your emotional temperature. Can you write in the chat, what is your emotional temperature today? I perfectly feel 36.6 with Enrica and all the quiet music and talking about this fantastic topic. So thank you for balancing me. So write in the chat, what is your emotional temperature, how you feel inside with your feelings and also your body and everything all together. This is what I love about retrospective. Enrico, do you have some, you know, magic questions which you use as well?
Later we'll see a little bit, because we'll run actually a retrospective about this session. So we'll do a quick retrospective about how was this session. And so I think that online now, the one that I use very often, because I use digital tools, is like, what is a photo that represents how you feel right now? Actually, you know what? I can probably share. Yeah, let me share this. But yeah, I guess the image, how do you feel today, with an image, or how do you feel today in one word, is one that that I use very often, because it's simple and fast.
Shamaida is writing to us, tired, I guess, but in numbers, you know, if 36.6 in Celsius is perfect Shamila, fully energized and ready to work. So a tired version of Shamila, what is it? 35.1 or 38 point, whatever. So I also was asked such questions as, if your previous week was a certain brand of a car, so what would it be? Would it be a Mercedes-Benz or a crazy Jeep or anything, a bicycle maybe? So my kids, you know, we can do retrospectives with our families and they love such questions. But the life hack I recognized is that every time you need to ask a fresh questions, not to involve in ignorance, you know, something new and fresh for people to think about and reflect.
Yeah.
So guys, are you measuring the temperature? Yeah, we have 34. "30, 35.6. End of day, of course, especially in Moscow. Already evening, we're tired.
Cool.
30. Perfect temperatures. Good. So I don't know if you're writing in Fahrenheit or Celsius. That's the question. How good you are. So we can continue, Enrico, right?
Oh, cool. Yeah. So let me just share. I'm just gonna share my. Outcome. Oh. All right. I was trying to share some boards that I use, but we'll get to that maybe later. So how do you include action items from the retro on your sprint backlog for the next sprint? If yes, do you estimate the story or not? In the Agile teams that I worked, we would not estimate stories that would not bring value to the user. So the answer is no. I would create them as chores. But yeah, different teams operate differently. When do you think is a good moment to ask for feedback? Meetings at the end, the last 5 minutes. So we'll actually do it next. So next up, we're going to do this retrospective on this session. I think I'm going to skip this slide so that we can start practicing. Yeah, so we'll actually start again, picking up your phone, reflecting on this content, on this first 15 minutes that we spent together. So if you think about that, the first question I have for you is, how do you feel about participating in this retrospective about the content that I presented? Do you feel like an explorer? You want to make the most out of this and learn everything you can and leave no stone unturned? Do you feel like a shopper? You're happy to be part of this retrospective, and that you want to actively look for things to put in your cart? Are you a vacationer? You're not really interested in running this retrospective about the content that I presented. Or you're a prisoner that you've been forced to be in this meeting and you already see a point and you won't be actively participating. So I see 5 people submitted their preference, so keep going. Usually what we do in an actual retrospective, we don't show it as we do right now. You just have the values hidden, and then you do a count through anonymous voting. And so again, if the room is full of prisoners and vacationers, then we have an issue. Then people won't probably contribute because they're not feeling like they're getting something out of it, or maybe because they're not really interested in the topic. So understanding what is interesting is key to a successful retrospective. And so next, let's move on to the gathering data step. And so what do you remember from the presented ideas? So you'll see a little input box. So fill in, what do you remember about the presented idea about Agile Retrospectives? I'll do this for a couple of minutes.
Enrico, while people are writing things, I have a question. On a real meeting, or when you have also, a live people in the room, do they share it orally, or they still write it on post-it notes because it's easier to write something instead of saying it in public? How does it work better?
So usually we use tools like Mural and Miro. I actually have I have some of the boards that I use, and so we use the digital post-it notes from that. So this is an example of a retrospective where you use just that. So this is setting the stage with how did you feel last week? What image represents how you feel today? But yeah, digital post-it notes is, in my experience, the way to go. Miro even have like mind maps, so you can use mind maps to connect data. But yeah, it's whatever works for the team. Some people might prefer to use paper, and that's why getting feedback is key. If people prefer to use pen and paper, just have them do that. I think it might be difficult to then do clustering. And this Miro board is actually not something I was planning to share, but yeah, maybe afterwards I'll create something that is. By the way, those are yeah, they're just like snapshots of stuff. So we're about up with the time with the gathering data, and so yeah, what do you remember about presented ideas? So this is kind of like the what about that, and there's different prompts for like the what as well. This is like what do you remember, what objective kind of like things do you remember, and then you can move on into like where were you intrigued or excited about what you heard. So second prompt. So yeah, feel free to like fill this in. So this is still in the gathering data, but rather than objective, it's more like subjective. It's more like a gut feeling, and it brings in a reflective kind of like mindset to prepare you for the next step. Cool.
I have put in the chat that you can use Miro, Mural, MindMeister, and there is actually a lot of platforms, some paid versions, some free access. So the good thing for me is that if you use something electronic, it's easier to store it and then review than if you use the paper thing. Whether you can always make a photo of your creative things you created together on the table, and you can store it as a photo as well. So, but the ones who are, just, starting the Agile story, Agile for me in simple words is about very basic things. It's all about people, and we have the principle that, you know, people, humans, they're always higher and more important than procedures, rule documents, and things like that. But the second thing is visualizing things. So visualizing everything as much as possible. Yeah, because we people, we live with eyes. We want to see things. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think finding where people are online is usually my strategy. So if they're familiar with Miro, let's use Miro. If they're familiar with Miro, let's use Miro. If they want to use Google Docs, let's play with Google Docs. So really, yeah, the technology aspect should be a way to help us get together rather than, oh my God, now I need to learn how to do this and whatever that is. Cool. And so the next question is, in your day-to-day, who would be most affected by the content of this presentation? And so what could you do to bring some of those ideas in your day-to-day? And so this, I guess, if you are working already in an Agile team and run retrospective, I guess the prompt is, what could you do to bring a retrospective in your personal life? And if you work at a university or an institution or a workplace that doesn't practice retrospectives yet, what could be the first step to bring in retrospectives? Or maybe you're already doing them and just calling them something else. So let's spend a couple of minutes answering this.
Enrica, according to your experience, what is the perfect timing for a nice, productive retrospective? So Agile is all about efficiency, so we cannot, you know, use 8 hours just to reflect, yeah, and do the retro. Depending on, you know, amount of people, most probably, but let's say if it's a family of 5 people, how much time would be needed in average to reflect and do the retro on the past year or the past week or a month?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I think Agile is always adapting to your context. So the one key that is really important is at the end is do that reflection. Was this time enough? Was it too much? Was it too little? That's how you're going to adjust. As a ballpark, I want to say with a group of 5, 6 people looking at a week or two, usually this is with a software team, I would spend about an hour 15, an hour and a half, that kind of ballpark. With a family looking back at a whole year, I have not done it personally with my family, but I would say maybe start with an hour and a half. See where you get to. And again, yes, time boxing those steps is important. So making sure that, okay, we're now wrapping up the gathering data. We spend maybe 10 minutes on that, 15 minutes on the divergent phase, 15 minutes on deciding what to do. So being aware, hey, look, we're about 5 minutes out. So usually when I facilitate, I say, hey, look, we're halfway through this activity. I'm not doing a very good job with this today. But reminding that, hey, we're halfway through, so that it helps us moving forward. So yeah, that's kind of like a ballpark. All right, so we are almost up with this. Let's reveal, I can initiate retro myself and facilitate, my Scrum team, my family, myself. I would like to try organizing such respect family friends as well as students I work with. Cool. Yeah, so this is basically the action. Really subtle. We went really fast. I think we spent about 10 minutes or less in this retro for this activity. So they can be really fast. You don't have to spend like an hour and a half. The outcome is obviously different. The depth of the conversation, in this case, the fact that we can't take a group decision. We have individuals connected from different parts of the world. So we are trying to look at personal steps. But yeah, this cycle of what do we see, what do we make of it, and what's the next step is really what's at the core of it, and what in my opinion is at the core of Agile. And the fact that at the end I suggest, okay, how was it? And this is what I'm asking you now. How was your time used in this session? And so between a complete waste of time on the left, mostly a waste of time, it broke even, it was satisfactory, better than average, or it was awesome. And so, yeah, feel free to do that. This is a ROTI, a return on time invested. And then we're gonna start probably going to break out into groups, reflect a little bit more, and then come back with questions.
Enrico, I have questions. I've heard that some retrospectives, they can be dedicated to a certain theme. Like, for example, you know, the island, and then the sharks attacking you on your ship, and then the treasure island, all these stories. Maybe you can share what you really like, you know, something which is interesting.
Yeah. So those are all metaphors that you place on top of this what, so what, now what. And there's a million out there. And I'm going to run a workshop in a couple of weeks where we're going to create fun retrospectives based on what you like. And so that really depends on the team. And so I don't know if I have a favorite one. I like to use some of those activities that like to create, they're called like destructive creativity. And so they, instead of saying, how can we make our next iteration perfect? They go the other way around and they ask, how can we mess up our next iteration? What's the worst possible job that we can do? Actually, let me wrap this up. So thanks for the feedback. And yeah, maybe like use this return on time invested is a very effective way to kind of like get the feeling of how it went. And so back to that activity, it's actually in here. So it's called TRIZ. And you start with make a list of the worst possible thing that we can do in respect to our next iteration. And so first you start from that. You do it with a singular person, then they do it in pairs, and then together they bring up ideas. What can we do to completely mess up our next iteration? And then you ask, okay, what are we doing today that is remotely linked to that? And so that is a way to kind of like foster that thinking rather than, okay, what can we improve? And then the next step is obviously, okay, out of those things that we're doing that are linked to the really bad things that we could be doing, how can we improve that? So that's one activity that I like. I created this like Agile Retrospective theme retrospective, Agile Retrospective themed retro. And it's, again, I would not use this unless I know that the group is familiar with Star Wars. So those themes fit certain contexts and do not fit other contexts. So yeah, it's up to the group. But if you look at this, it goes through the 5 steps. So how do you feel about this retrospective? There is a stormtrooper, there is a Mandalorian. So rather than using the explorer, shopper, vacationer, prisoner, there are Star Wars kind of ideas. And then how was the last iteration? And then there are photos. And so understanding where people stand with using an analogy. And then you gather data. You have questions that, where did we blow up the Death Star and how? And then, okay, what do we make of this? And this is where we start diverging. We generate ideas. And then we decide what to do. I created this acronym FORCE, which is like SMART, kind of like specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. But it's first step, observable, responsibility, who's responsible, do we control this? So you can come up with this yourself. And it's really whatever is works for the team, for the group, would be my recommendation.
Thank you so much.
Suruchi is posting that. Yeah, it's really something that can be applied to a lot of different contexts. And so what I'd like to do is to send the groups out in breakouts and reflect a little bit about. I have a couple of prompts here.
Yeah, I mean, Enrico, I just wanted to share one thought. I mean, you might be aware of it. I mean, retrospective is the best ceremony we can use in our real life. I mean, for anything, right from the small task to the bigger one, right from just cleaning the bathroom to maybe moving the entire house. If we apply retro, that is really helpful. So I find that similarity between agility and the real life very well, and I really enjoy that. So just wanted to share the thoughts.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suruchi.
Amazing. I love you calling this a ceremony. You know, it gives
Yes.
it a nice twist. And I'm thinking that it can be a tea retrospective where you have a tea ceremony and then, you know, enjoy the tea and then you actually, you know, work. And am I right, Enrico? The lean coffee meeting is one of the formats we can use for the retros, or not really?
Yeah, I think lean coffee fits in the sense that it's a self-organizing way to let topics emerge and then put some action in that. The only thing that it's not part of lean coffee is the opening, so the setting the stage and the closing. So you might want to add a quick anonymous activity to check the team temperature at the beginning, and then at the end to do the kind of like a return on time invested. But yeah, that's one way to do it.
Enrico, let's quickly share how it works, the lean coffee meeting, because, you know, this is a really time-saving thing. Do you want to explain it, or do you want me to share how I see it? You definitely have much more experience than I do. I just had a few in my life.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, lean coffee is like just a way to, if you're familiar with open space, it's kind of like an open space in miniature. So people come up with topics that they're interested in bringing up. Those topics are briefly explained to the group. And then there is a polling on what do we want to focus on. So then there's a list of priorities. So the first topic, second topic, third, fourth topic. And then they get tackled one at a time. And usually once the time ran out, you have like, okay, should we continue talking? And you do kind of like a Roman vote kind of thing. Thumbs up, continue, down, move on, sideways, I don't have a preference. And that's pretty much it. Like once you discuss those topics, you ask, is there something actionable we can do about it? And so that's how I've seen lean coffee work. And it can fit in a retrospective agenda. One item that we haven't really talked about is how some problems, like it's sufficient to look at them 5 minutes and find the solutions. But other problems, and that's, I guess one downside of using lean coffee is in 5 minutes, we might only get to the surface of some of those issues. And so it might be good for an initial reflection, but sometime it might be like the generating insight step. You might want to spend more than 5 minutes. And so, yeah, that's where the context is king and finding out what is right for that group is ideal. But yeah, definitely try out lean coffee. I think there's even like a website called leancoffee.org. There's like a thing that you can use.
Lover, so this metaphor really makes a rule number one for lean coffee meeting is making a good coffee. That's for me, you know, the secret of it all. But we used it in the team where we had a circle of people, and usually when we have a meeting, you know, everybody wants to share so many things. And what I like there that you have a timer, so you really concentrate. You have a minute to share what are the topics, and then people are voting, you know, so it's quite fair. So out of my 3 topics, only one is selected. Then I'm also limited in time, having a few minutes to tell what's my challenge, what's the stopper, what the barrier. And then everybody has his voice, you know, everybody has a limited time as well to come up with solutions, recommendations, support, whatever. So, you know, it works for me. It's kind of a disciplined agile, this format, you know, because they sometimes say that agility is all about, you know, freedom and self-expression and people, but sometimes people need a little bit of frameworks, you know, the timers and limits. Yep. And lean coffee works. And also, if you have kids here, well, we mostly have students, try to play the game with the lean coffee. It can be not coffee, it can be ice cream, it can be, I don't know, cacao meeting, whatever, or hot milk. And try to set the timers and, you know, give voice to your children talking about what are the questions, what are the topics they want to discuss, and they will really enjoy it. It's like a game. In the end, you know, as Sigmund Freud told us, there is a little kid inside every of us, so we need to integrate a little bit of gaming to the retros and meetings sometimes, I think.
Yeah. And one thing to know, when we vote on teams that are diverse, so for example, there is 1 designer and 4 software developers, the topics brought up by the designer are, just by virtue of having 1 versus 4, going to be less likely to bubble up. And so when we do those polling, and this is true for Link Coffee, but it's true for any other like prioritization, we might want to be aware of that difference and give a higher or a different kind of like way to have the minority in the group bubble up. Otherwise, the designer will kind of be stuck hearing software developer stories, and his stories might not never kind of come up. So yeah, this is just like a tip to kind of like notice if the designer becomes completely disengaged in those meetings, that you might need to balance out their vote. So do like a balancing vote. Cool. And Julia, I was wondering about the participants, if they want to answer those questions here in the chat or unmuting or going to breakouts. I was thinking to put them in breakouts. We have about 20 minutes-ish left.
I think let's try the breakout rooms. Just let's have the questions so people know what to talk about. Yeah.
So basically, I have two prompts for you guys. And one is like, how can an Agile retrospective help in your day-to-day? So again, similar to before, if you are doing it already at work, think about how you do it in your day-to-day and what obstacles do you see bringing an Agile retrospective in your day-to-day. So if you're using it at work, what obstacle do you see bringing them in your personal life? Or if you're not using it at work, how can you do that? I'm going to put the prompts in.
And you don't need to participate. So how much time? Let's dedicate about, I don't know, 5 minutes to that. If you don't want to use your mic or video, you can still be with us in the chat. And then we will be back here as well to the main room to discuss a little bit more. So do whatever you want. Sounds good. Enrico, we're going to the rooms as well with you, right?
Yeah, I'll be moving around rooms. Yeah, that works.
Great. Should we click something to get into the rooms, or it will be automatic?
I don't have capability to do the rooms, so you can make me co-host. Okay. If you make me co-host, I can do that real fast.
I'm making you an organizer, so you can do now whatever.
You know what?
I'm not sure.
It looks like, yeah, I think this account doesn't have breakouts.
No, we don't have. So we need to.
That's okay. We can answer. Yeah, we can. I guess we can answer the questions in the chat. So maybe we'll take like a couple of minutes of silent thinking, look at the question, and yeah, sorry, Suruchi, I don't think the breakouts are active on this Zoom account. Yeah. I assumed that it was because of my privileges. So yeah, maybe look at the prompts and yeah, let's take a couple of minutes and then start typing answers, or just like if you want to just share with a microphone, you can react, raise your hand, and let us know that way so that we can have a face-to-face chat. So how can an Agile retrospective help in your day-to-day? And while I start the timer, the other way to frame it is, what problems do you see bringing an Agile retrospective in your day-to-day? Out of all the stuff that we said, if you try and bring it, what issues do you see? What are some blockers, some things that you think would be just very difficult for an Agile retrospective to help you?
Whether you do a retrospective with your family, or with your partner, or at work with your working team, or with your students, or with your professors. So what could be the challenges?
Mm-hmm.
It involves people, so there should be some challenges for sure. People is the difficult part of the story, but the one to tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the challenge that I would like to share, I mean, is this the right time to share the answer?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So one of the challenge I would like to share could be the emotional intelligence of the people to handle the honest feedback, tackle it, and focusing on the improvement or maybe the change. That could be one of the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, yeah, go ahead.
Suruchi, do you want to share what emotional intelligence is for the persons in the audio or watching the video later on?
Yeah. So overall, from my standpoint, emotional intelligence means trying to do the right thing without getting your emotions in a way. I mean, if you need to get the thing in a right way, just because maybe, for example, you are upset, or maybe you are angry, or maybe you are say sad, that should not impact the overall decision of the effort. I mean, it should happen in a right way. That is how I can see uh, the emotional intelligences. And um, I think that could be one of the potential impediment that may come in a way of having the right decision in retrospective.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone have any thoughts about this piece that was just shared?
Nope. No one?
No.
We just had a session on emotional intelligence yesterday.
I saw Sarfraz unmuting. Do you want to share, Sarfraz?
Yeah, I was actually supposed to join the emotional intelligence session yesterday, but I was unable to because of work. So sincere apologies for that. But I actually had a different idea of emotional intelligence, and I might be wrong, but I always thought it was more geared towards being aware of the kind of effects of talking to people a certain way, or talking about certain things, or how someone might be feeling, and then adjusting your approach to a situation to be able to like kind of do things in an appropriate way. But I just wanted to kind of clarify what the correct definition is of emotional intelligence.
Enrico, what is emotional intelligence for you?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if there's a definition. I don't know it. To me, it means being aware of, being empathetic and aware of who surrounds you. And so both definitions to me resonates. So doing the right thing and being aware of our emotions, and being aware that we affect people by our emotions. I guess, is there someone in the audience that has a scientific definition or definition they want to share? Or Julia, do you?
I've shared in the chat emotional intelligence exercise, which we had yesterday in our emotional intelligence session dedicated to the topic. So if you open the Google Drive document, you can see there what actually emotional intelligence, EI, means to me. It's me versus others. So it's understanding myself, but also understanding others, understanding thoughts, feelings, aspirations, fears, emotions, anything, being in the shoes of the people. It's of course very difficult, but at least, having a little sense of how do they feel in their shoes, but also reflecting, okay, I'm wearing the shoes. How do I feel now? And this exercise, it's kind of a homework. I'm a university professor, so I need to be strict with you. You can do it, and there are killer questions. For example, you can, this is, for me, a little bit very in line with retro, because you look back at the last week or the last month, and you actually observe your own activities. What do you do in regards to other people? Are you helping them? Are you supporting them? Are you sending them reminders so they don't do any mistake and they don't forget something? Are you giving little gifts, or you generously say to them good words, or do you bring coffee and show the signs of care? You just take a look at your activity. What do you do? As if like, oh, I always do this. I always share a Facebook post of my friend who's promoting his business, or I always tell to people that they look great or they work great if I think so. So this always means that actually you need it. You do things to people which you actually need. So if you want to understand yourself, what I'm lacking, what I'm missing, what I really want other people to do to me, you can see, what are you doing to them? In most of the cases, this is something which is related to your own needs. So, and step number 2, we're in Agile, we need to action. You need to seek for, 1, 2, 3 people, and you need to say about your needs, saying, hey, I really want you to do some appraisal, share a good word, a compliment, recognize me, because good words, they keep me going. Or I really want you, to call me every day just for 5 minutes for me to feel that, you remember it about me. So I feel the connection, blah, blah, blah. So, and another thing, if you want to understand people in your team, you really need to observe what they do. So let's say I'm working with Enrico and I see Enrico is really, always writing me WhatsApp messages, taking care of me, asking, how I'm doing. It means that Enrico wants me to ask the same questions to him. So this is so easy because people are just, the mirrors to each other. We reflect each other. We can see our reflection in each other. So the last thing I want to say that, we're good people. We never hate anybody. We never dislike anybody. So if after the session, after me talking so much, you feel like, oh, Julia, I really hate her, I don't like her. No, everything is fine with you. You don't like me. There is something, I'm a mirror to you, and there is something you don't like about your reflection. Yeah, I remind you on something you may have or not have. So, we're good people. We don't hate anyone. That's my message. And emotional intelligence is all about, observing, listening, hearing, then thinking, analyzing, putting down such things, to drive understanding between people. This is what it is for me. Sorry, I got so excited about my favorite topic. I'm still working on my emotional intelligence, though.
Thank you for that, and thanks for the document. That sounded like a really meditative approach to it, but I like it. Thank you.
So this is Suruchi. I do agree with what Julia says.
Sorry to interrupt, Suruchi. I just want to make sure that we give space to everyone else on this call. So if they have questions about the Agile retrospectives in their day-to-day, so let's give them like a few seconds.
Okay.
And maybe we're gonna just put the prompt again in the chat.
Absolutely.
So, and if nothing emerges, we can go back to this conversation, but just want to be aware of, there's a lot of silent people and maybe they're just like happy with wherever we go, but let's give it a couple of seconds.
No worries.
And that was 20. Yeah. So I think this is another thing when we facilitate. Just be very comfortable with uncomfortable silence. But make sure that you count to 20, because maybe Nicholas or Roxanne, they were just waiting to say something. And the 3 of us were kind of overtaking the conversation. And especially online, that is really, that can really shut people down. And so with Mentimeter, we kind of tried to keep people engaged, but just being aware of that, I think, is another key when we facilitate online. I think it's very interesting. The conversation about emotional intelligence didn't mean to shut it down, just to give space to everyone else. Connected to one of the questions at the beginning, when people are silent, what can we do about it? And yes, I think we can go back to it. If no one else has any other questions, it doesn't appear to, nothing is popping up in the chat.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, kind of linked to this, I guess, something, my kind of day job is within a kind of traditional kind of office finance-based atmosphere. So one of the biggest kind of things I would face would be introducing, this agile approach to people who didn't really care for it. That's probably the biggest barrier I would face, to be able to explain it to them and help them see the benefits.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the why is really key to this. Like everything, when I join teams that are like, we want to be agile, I always ask, why do you want to be agile? what's in it for you. And I think the whole retrospective, that's why I only laser focused on the principle 12. It really is a concept about reflecting and improving on what we do, which it can be really taken in isolation. And so the way, I believe that you might already do something similar when something goes wrong, maybe what can we do about it? With a retrospective, I guess and again, I wouldn't sell it. I'm not in the convincing business, but the question I would ask is, well, what if we create like a way to not be so reactive, but be a little bit more proactive and make this feedback cycle part of our organization? What about that? And then I would see what phases emerges. But yeah, some places are, and I've worked at places that just wouldn't fly. We fix things when there's a problem. And there's, at that point is where you doing a personal retrospective becomes a great next step, because at least we can control what we do. But yeah, I don't know if that helps at all. I think it was it Sarfraz?
Yeah, that was me. No, that's really helpful. Yeah, I think it's definitely agree. The approach, sorry, the situation I was thinking about is where the person who's in charge and available, actually able to change something, and they're the ones who don't want to do anything. Then yeah, that's a great idea that you can then do it yourself, and that's probably something that I will try and do. Thanks for that.
And on that note, I think there's another like important thing. There's this. I said I was going to talk about it. I really didn't. There's like this thing called, I don't know if you see the background of my camera, but there is like this thing called the circles of influence, or circles and soups. And you basically you look at events and you put in the middle circle what you control, what you influence, and what is outside is in the soup. So about the stuff that is outside, for example, COVID restrictions, we cannot influence them. We can still, as a team, decide how to react to it. So we can still come up with a plan, with an action item on how can we as a team react to maybe this event that only this person can do, but we don't have control over. And that might ease us up. That might actually shift the system. Our actions might actually shift something. But yeah, I've been in environments where like that. So yeah, play it around, see how it goes, and yeah, let us know.
So I'm actively sharing things here in the chat. First of all, I shared the link to Moscow State University Business School, which really has plenty of activities for adults, for pupils, for everybody, for management topics, business topics, IT, and whatever. So feel free to visit their webpage for more information. I also shared the next webinar, which will be led by our colleagues from Agile 20 Reflect Festival. You have a direct Zoom link, so they are starting just now in a few minutes, so you can make another cup of coffee and join them. I'm joining them for sure. Enrico, is there something so important we need to tell so people grab it and they take it with them today on retros?
Make sure that you receive feedback. So at the end of those, like, be open for feedback and iterate. There isn't like a perfect recipe. Each context is a little bit different. Iterate and ask for help. There's a community of people out there that are like willing to do that. And yeah, so I think those are the nuggets.
Yeah, and for me, what works is when you really, with every retro, you ask some different questions, and they can be, the question, what should I do more? What should I do less? What should I stop doing? What should I start doing because I'm not doing that? Just try to reformulate it, be creative, and find your own way, because we're all individual. And I need to say, actually, big thanks to my mother, Elvira, who is with us. Of course, if it's one and only person watching me on Facebook, that's my mom. She is real agile and, proficient in making retros. All my childhood was drinking hot tea and doing the retrospective. So guys, if you have children, start doing it now, because then it really goes well with emotional intelligence. The earlier you start to be agile, the better. So, but I'm still growing that, of course. So, Mom, hello. I'm waving. Any questions, chat or voice, anything? Yeah, we can exchange our LinkedIn profiles if we want to connect. Enrico, are you doing more events on the fest?
Not on the festival, but there are events like in a couple of weeks, I think. There is one about designing your own retrospective. So like that Star Wars team, we're going to build something like that with a group of people. And there is a monthly retrospective on retrospectives. So basically reflecting on how we reflect. That's part of the Agile Alliance initiative. So yeah, if you probably Twitter is the way that I publish a lot of those things, or you can find me on LinkedIn as well, where I publish some of that stuff. So yeah.
Good. Thank you, guys. Thank you. So Ruchi, do you have any question? Because we interrupted you a little bit to give chance to everybody. Do you still have a message for us?
Actually, I did type my question in the chat box, and I think Enrico responded to that. So I would refer to that link. I will go through that material. That would be helpful.
Yeah, and I think I guess the question was like the ideal retro. And I think again, in a few words, is making sure that we check the team temperature so we know who's in the room and how they feel. We make sure that we get feedback on what we do and make sure that we do something about it. So there's some actions coming out of a reflection, basically following those 5 steps to give, even if it's brief, it's enough to let us know, okay, how do they feel, how this group feels, and how was this session, opening and closing. Do some divergent thinking, some ideas about how to improve with a lot of prompts. And in those blog posts, I have like plenty of those prompts, and then deciding what to do, actionable things. So yeah, that's a good kind of like stepping stone to get to an ideal retro. The reality is it'll always be a little bit different. And once you get familiar with the team, having them own it, that's the other thing. So when we go in as coaches, as scrum master, as whatever, the team should be able to kind of like see those, like be motivated to do those for themselves because they matter. So we become kind of like redundant. They own the process. So yeah, that's another thing. So 2 things. But yeah, best of luck.
The why question. So when you go to the action points on, what should we do? What should we change? Start doing, stop doing, before, actually defining how to do things and what to do, just ask yourself, why? Why should I do it? Why should we do it as a team? So always getting back to the big mission, to your objectives, to your values. For me, this is also sometimes an eye-opening things because, working on projects with the deadlines, with the pressure, we sometimes forget the basics, like, what am I doing here? Yeah, so even to now, we are already 5 minutes past, we need to say bye-bye. Think, okay, but honestly, why? Why did I spend the past 1.5 hours? For what? Yeah, so what is it? And also we talked about emotional intelligence yesterday. It sometimes helps you also to get rid of stress and anger, which is natural for all us people. I don't think that agile people are angels. They're great people, but we still have our emotions. But the question of, okay, why? Why am I doing this workshop? Why am I listening to the speaker? Why I run the retrospective? It really helps to feel good. Yeah, and we know by science, happy people who feel good about their lives, they work happy and they actually achieve better results and they deliver more profit. So let's be happy all. That's my message. No worry, be happy. So thank you guys. Wrapping up. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Ciao,
Bye-bye.
ciao. Thanks, Moscow State University Business School, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you.
Thanks.